And welcome to the Skeptic Hangout, the place where we sit back, relax, and discuss some of humanity's most controversial and intriguing concepts through the lens of skepticism. We have with us Richard, who is excitable, pedantic, and colorful, Laura, the energetic, passionate chatterbox, and the other Richard, enthusiastic and witty, yet by his own definition, gormless. Today, we will be discussing psychics. So grab your English tea or your iced caramel frappuccino, get comfy, and join us as we take a look in our crystal balls.
No champagne this week, Oliver.
No, Coca-Cola.
Coca-Cola. So you would have known that if you were psychic.
Are available.
Yeah. I don't drink them. Drink Coca-Cola.
I'm much more of a Pepsi man myself. Pepsi Max all the way.
See, I don't like either one. I'm just not a soda person.
I don't do non-sugar at all. It's got to be full fat sugar. I've not bought a American, well, non-international viewers might not know what we're talking about now, but I've not bought a bottle of Iron Brew since they got rid of all the sugar in it, like 3 years ago.
Right, no, here's the thing. So Iron Brew is amazing. The sugar-free Iron Brew is pants. Yeah. But Iron Brew Extra tastes better than original Iron Brew, in my opinion, and it's zero sugar. So have a look for that one, Gilliver.
My niece has actually bought me a bottle, but she's in Manchester, so I've got to wait for her to come over and give it to me.
It's good. It's really good.
Are we now sponsored and I just missed something? So drink Iron Brew, everybody. I don't know. Yeah. We'll take whatever. Okay, so psychics. So I'm going to go ahead and out myself and say all week when I was looking forward to making this episode, I thought I read physics. So I was preparing myself up until about 2 minutes ago to talk about what is smaller than a molecule. And now we're going to be talking about people who think they know things.
I'm under the impression that they're relatively separate fields of study. Relatively separate.
I mean,
it depends who you're talking to.
Yeah. Yeah. So psychics, where should we get started?
Let's start at the beginning. In about, I don't know when it was, the 1850s, there were three sisters called the Fox sisters, I think they were called, who set up the first kind of seances, and I think they were, if I remember rightly, they were the first people to charge money for the psychic abilities, psychic demonstrations, and they had the kind of whole knocking thing going. I don't actually know that much about them.
I heard about them. They're the ones that had, where like they would make the knocks in their room or in their house, and then they went on the road.
From what I remember, they were the two younger sisters kind of convinced the older sister that this was going on in the beginning. But I think by the end of their lives, at least one of them, if not all of them, had kind of denounced it and admitted it was fake. But that started the kind of same time. There were a lot of people doing it, and it started at the same time as the kind of spiritualist church and stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if they were connected.
Well, I think all of those sides of things are like, I'm of the understanding that it was like a Christian idea in terms of like linked with the idea of a Christian afterlife and all those sorts of things.
Are you talking about psychics?
Yeah, because I think the spiritualist church was one, and again, it's not an expert subject of mine, but like the spiritualist church, one of the first spiritualist churches was in the town where I grew up, just on the other side of Halifax. And yeah, my understanding is that it was sort of half psychics talking to the dead and half like old-fashioned Christian church. Like it was like the melding of those two ideas. So it was still proper and Victorian and churchy, but it was also sort of speaking to the dead and stuff like that as well.
I mean, I have no idea what it was like originally. I've actually been to a modern day spiritualist church just once with one of my friends who invited me there. And they kind of they had the Lord's Prayer and like a few snippets of Christianity in the kind of book leaflet thing they gave you as you went in. But they kind of distanced themselves from Christianity at the same time. and said they were nothing to do with Christianity, even though they'd clearly plagiarized like huge parts of it.
I like they sing hymns and stuff, don't they? Like,
yeah.
So do you think that they're like a blend between Christianity and other pagan religions, or do you think that they're Christianity and then they develop their own different doctrine that, like, kind of like how Mormonism, for example, it's a whole other doctrine. Like, you can't really link it back to a specific other religion that blended in. It was like a whole new thing. So is that's the spiritual, that's what you think it is? Like, it's a whole new take on Christianity.
However,
I don't know enough to speak about it.
Huh.
Sorry.
No, I was saying I probably should have just Googled it about 6 minutes ago.
I don't know enough about it to speak with any authority. As far as I imagine, and this is completely like just thrown out of my brain, I've no knowledge of this whatsoever, that originally it was like more Christian and then kind of an extension of Christianity to do with the kind of psychic thing that was kind of sweeping Britain and America at the time. Mm-hmm. You had Arthur Conan Doyle was really interested in all that stuff, wasn't he? And believed in fairies and.
Well, I think it was like a big deal in the sort of mid to late 1800s. Like all the sorts of realms of things that we talk about to do with like spirituality rather than religion. A real big deal. And I think it was a big melting pot of all the sorts of things. And obviously, sort of more nowadays, when we think of like psychic stuff, I think often very different ideas can come into our minds. It might be the middle-aged ladies on TV trying to get people to call in to tell the future, or the big stage shows that happen, or people being charged for private readings of like palm readings or tarot card readings, and all these sorts of things are all sort of again in this big category of psychics. And there's kind of a lot to it, I guess.
Yeah, because you even have people like John Edwards, who would say that he's talking to the dead, and he does it in a way that doesn't seem like your average like store shop psychic, where you're going and reading a crystal ball. He seems to be more sophisticated, and he talks in front of a big crowd, and he's almost like the motivational speaker version of a psychic. And there's other ones like him. His is just the name that comes to mind.
Do you think that's a natural progression of it though? Because if you think back to the early days, not that any of us were there not even me with my advanced age was alive in the 1850s, but if you kind of think back to the photographs and things of psychics in the 1850s and stuff, it was all these photos of people with all the did they have photographs in the 1850s?
I think so.
Yeah.
It was all the people with the kind of ectoplasm coming out of the nose, which just looked like a big sheet. And have you seen the photos? They're ridiculous. And obviously, as technology's moved on,
they've become more sophisticated.
Many of these things, it has to be to continue to be able to fool people.
Because I think you think of like a psychic, and if you go to, like you were saying, Laura, like a street shop sort of psychic where you go for a private reading, it's 30 quid or whatever. You still imagine a room that looks like the 1850s. You still imagine like frilly curtains and those lamps
deep,
with the
dark colors.
Deep colors, velvet, all that sort of stuff, don't you? But I think I don't know if that's more of a cliche nowadays of that sort of realm of psychic stuff. And I guess maybe like you were saying, that might be the way forward in terms of if people are going to continue doing this and people are still going to be paying them to do it, maybe that sort of motivational speaker style presentation is something that would be more approachable or more wantable by people.
I think it wows more people all at once, like more publicly, and it allows for less time for like scrutiny, right? So if you're sitting there getting a private reading and you're skeptical, there's a lot of opportunity to say like ask questions or examine or kind of challenge them and put it to the test. But when you're sitting in an audience full of like hundreds of people and this guy is just popping shit off left and right, and if you don't know his methods and you don't know what he's doing, it is super easy to get caught up in the emotion of it. And so even if like say 80% of the crowd doesn't really buy it, it was just fun, he's capturing that other 20% or whatever I made those percentages up, but he is capturing at least a percentage of the people. And so it's almost like a shotgun versus like a sniper rifle. if you ask me. So yeah, modern technology, I think, makes the charlatan side of psychics that much more lucrative.
Has there been any elements of that sort of all these psychic things that we talked about that either of you have ever sort of given any credit to or sort of believed in the past?
No.
I think the closest, yeah. Jillivers is a really easy answer. No.
Thank you for watching Skeptic Hangout. We'll see you
see you next week. No, I think the closest I've come to the wow factor in terms of psychic is the intuition thing. There are people who have really good intuitions and really know how to read people. And I mean, there's the practiced magician side of it of like, oh, statistically speaking, when you say like, oh, you have a family of 4, that's the most popular sized family. It's very easy to guess. If they have 4 children and 6 total, you could say, oh, I meant just the children. Like there's a lot you can do with that. So there's the practiced side. But then there's also this intuitive side where they're like, oh, I'm sensing something's not right, or I'm sensing you're feeling a certain way or whatever. And they may actually be just dead on sensing that there's something there. Not the people who are you're hiring to do that, but like a friend or something who's like, oh, I have this intuition and I'm psychic. But what you're really seeing is they're just picking up on emotions and picking up on subtleties and listening to what you're saying and putting connecting dots together. I think some people do that exceptionally well. And so that's where I get the wow factor. Like, I don't think it's supernatural, but it still just blows me away.
There are things in that, like with my, sorry, Jill, I'll quickly say this. Like my mum's an identical twin, for example, and she recounts experiences of things like something really, really bad has happened to her twin sister miles and miles away, and she suddenly like stopped and got goosebumps, rang her and said, "What's up?" And she's been, and there are things like that, and again, I don't know how true that is, or if she's exaggerating her memories or experiences of the past, or there's no way of me investigating that either.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, there are things like that people say, and I think it sounds believable, and you think, oh well, the twins, so they must be sort of linked somehow, or
psychically connected.
Yeah, but I don't know how that would physically work. Like what is the mechanics behind that? Yeah, Gilliver.
It doesn't have to physically work, does it, though? Because at the end of the day, we've got, positive discriminations are well-known phenomena. And, she may have had this bad feeling and phoned a sister and, and got it right. How many times did she have a bad feeling and it was wrong?
Yeah.
And you kind of block that out. My
remember those times.
Yeah, how many times?
My best friend will always say to me, I knew you were going to phone then. I just had a feeling you were going to phone. But how many times? We speak to each other every day. I'm going to phone at some point.
No, that
I am, if nothing, monotonous.
Or predictable. No, that kind of brings up a good point. Like that even just happened to me last night where I sort of got a bad feeling about a friend and I was just kind of in a funky mood about it. And I had reached out to them and they didn't answer. And Mark's like, what's wrong? And I was like, I don't know. I just don't feel good. Well, the next morning, this friend calls me and they had a family emergency, right? I was like, I just knew something was wrong. But what I told them, like, I didn't give it any sort of credence in terms of psychicism. I was like, you and I communicate, like we play games on sort of a schedule every night. And this person wasn't there to play games, wasn't texting me, wasn't responding to my texts. It's like, oh no, you broke a routine. Something was different. Like there was something different about the way that we normally interact together. And I just picked up on it and I knew that something was wrong. Right. And so like going back to like your mom, like it maybe there's like a subtle difference in the way they communicated or things have been going a different way than what they're used to. And she just kind of got that feeling.
Or it was just a coincidence that something happened where she was and something bad happened to be happening to her sister. And I think the thing you're on about like false positives and stuff, when you see like these big, I mean, there's all over YouTube, those like psychic cringe fails, medley videos or whatever. Yeah, but like psychics will say 3 or 4 different things and you only remember the one thing that they kind of got right that you then pick up on, and that's that's carried on. I don't know how popular he is in America. Have you heard of Darren Brown, Laura?
Yes.
Yeah. He's a really good example of someone who says, I can do all these things and incredibly convincingly. Yeah. And I am telling you, it is not psychic and it is not true. It's a thing that I have learned to do. And he's amazing at doing those sorts of things, like really highly skilled.
So people like Darren Brown and Randy, James Randi, they both, like, they have spent their lives showing people how it can be done just by learning the tricks and the tricks of the trade. And I think it's interesting that it can be so easily demonstrated to be done the way that they do it, and yet people still say, "Oh no, well, you might be able to fake it, but this guy over here, that's a real psychic." It's just,
to me, it's even more impressive though. Like I can buy into that much more of someone saying, "Look at this incredible skill that I've got on hand." Like it is still mind blowing when you see it, you know, performed and stuff. Mind blowing.
Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier. Is like it is fascinating to me.
Yeah,
it's so easy though, isn't it? And that's why it works, to be fooled by people, whether they're honest and letting you know that they're doing it, whether they're honest and laying out the trick as it is, whether they're honest and just being a magician and you know you're going to be fooled, or whether they're dishonest or they genuinely believe they have some kind of power, because let's not say that they're all definitely dishonest because we don't know this, and whether they actually believe they have some kind of power, and it is easy, regardless of which it is easy for us to be fooled, you know, unless you're an insider and you have the tricks of the trade, unless you're a James Randi or a Darren Brown and you know how it's working. I'm useless when I go and see a magic show. I've no idea how they're doing the tricks at all. It completely baffles me. But that's part of the entertainment value of it.
Yeah.
And I almost don't want to know because of that. Like once you find out, it kind of loses a little bit of its like what makes it kind of mystical and interesting. You're like, oh, I know how that's done. And it's neat to know how tricks are done, but it does lose sort of a little bit of its edge. But going on to like what you said with like Randy and Darren, and like there are people like Popoff who they, like Randy, for example, like proved through recordings and stuff that he was listening to someone backstage and she was feeding him information and all that stuff. And so there is a fine line between the actual charlatan who knows what they're doing is a trick and is purposefully and deliberately extorting people, and then the person who's just really genuinely convinced that that they have a gift. So what do you guys think about that?
Isn't it impossible to know the difference between the people who genuinely believe they've got a gift and the people who are trying to convince everybody that they've got a genuine gift? You know, like, I mean, obviously you can test it, but you know, like, I think it's difficult. I think it's difficult to like say this person is definitely a charlatan and this person actually believes they've got a gift, because maybe they do genuinely believe they've got a gift in something, versus people who are honestly just trying to, well, I say honestly, dishonestly trying to just take money from people who are vulnerable.
I think you can prove who's dishonest. You can't prove who. This is going to sound kind of weird. You can prove when people like Popoff or who's the one? Edward.
Jonathan.
Yeah, John Edwards.
Sorry.
No, when you get people like that who you can prove how they do it and you can show how they do it, you have the recordings.
Right,
in that sense, yes, you can prove positively that someone is a charlatan. I think proving that someone positively is a genuine believer, I think you're right. They can be very, 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 very convincing. And you, at the end of the day, you still don't know for sure.
And I think lots of pseudoscientific words are used, or like there's a vocabulary, isn't there, of this whole thing that people that are all sort of made up of words that people don't necessarily understand because they don't use them day to day, and so therefore it sounds impressive when someone talks about something. So people talk about, you know, energies, and people talk about, I mean, there's loads of different things that are like cobbled in this which don't all seem to fit, you know, like there are things about like past lives people talk about, and I can read your past lives and what you were in the past or whatever, as well as things that will happen in the future, as well as dead people who've passed on to the next plane or another realm or heaven, or and I think there's not like a clear sort of doctrine behind all of this, because it's not like an organized group like a religion or something. It's just lots of individual people just sort of jumping on this bandwagon. I
think they do tend to float together or congregate together though, don't they? So a lot of these things. It's like we were talking about in the UFO thing. You know, a lot of people who experience UFOs experience a certain type of alien if they've had an alien encounter because of the folklore that's grown up around it. And I think it's a kind of the same thing with this. You do get a lot of repeating ideas and things like that within it because they do congregate together and they do talk to each other and they do go to the same shows and they do you know, and they believe in the same things. Like they do believe in reincarnation. A lot of them, you know, they believe if they see a feather, it's from an angel. That's one of my favorites.
Angel.
Well, and there is this, like, people write books, people teach classes, right?
Yeah.
They publish stuff, things are in the news. So yeah, I think you're right. I think there's many different ways that once a trend gets started, it picks up its own momentum and it kind of keeps going. So you're right. You have a lot of these little fractured fringe, lots and lots of different ideas. But at the same time, I think Gilliver is right. There is sort of a trend towards this general idea of what a psychic is. And most psychics that I've like heard of or been exposed to kind of fall within that general realm. Or at least within a few general like categories, like you said, be it the readings or like the card readings or reading a person's home or whatever, or like seeing ghosts. I don't know. Like there's sort of I don't know exactly where I was going with that. It was like they do tend to learn from one another. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
About 15 years ago, I used to when I was much more proactive in challenging people than I am now. Believe it or not, I used to be worse than I am now for challenging bad ideas. I actually went through a phase of like emailing, finding out supposed psychics, and emailing them. And I had a list of 10 questions that I used to use. I can't remember them. I've probably still got them somewhere, but it was kind of a setup.
Post them in the Facebook discussion group if you find them.
Yes,
I will do. It was a setup. They were really simple questions, like why do people see ghosts at night and things like that. You know, things of that nature. But they were set up, and I used to tell them that it was a setup when I emailed them or had a conversation with them. I was upfront with them, and I said to you, because you know how you answer this will affect what the second layer of questions is going to be, which is much more in depth. And I remember one set, it was an husband and wife team, and they taught people, they taught, like, ran courses for like hundreds and hundreds of pounds.
Like psychic courses?
Yeah, how to develop your psychic abilities,
Yeah.
and like workshops and stuff. And I emailed them, and I started talking to the wife, and she must have like got out of a death, and her husband took over. And the kind of the third email, it was saying like, you know, we're literally going to sue you if you don't stop. They'd stopped engaging with the questions because I'd literally just torn the like thing apart. I'd gone, we'd only got to the second layer of questions, and they didn't even answer the second layer of questions because I'd just set them up that much. But it was really bad stuff. It was really harmful stuff. Like, one of the things they said that they'd done was contacted the family of Madeleine McCann because they knew who the killer was. And like, I'd said this was, obviously I'd put to him, this wasn't a good thing to do. This was an unhealthy thing to do. And I'd like said, how did they react? And he said, oh, they didn't want to know. I said, well, don't that tell you something? You know, don't tell you how much harm you're causing. When you're like telling people have lost the daughter and in suspicious circumstances and, you know, never been found. And you're telling them that, that she's been killed and we can tell you who the killer is. You know, and it was,
and that can just rip open new wounds. And go ahead.
Yeah, because I think you could quite easily argue, couldn't you, with stuff like this, that in some ways, you know, someone lost a loved one, they go for a psychic reading, the psychic tells them, they're here, they're safe, they say they love you, go along your merry way, thanks for your money. And that does no harm because the person just feels relieved that the loved one is fine on the other side, and it's giving them that bit of comfort in their hour of need and stuff. And in a way, I can kind of understand that, but I think there are much healthier ways of getting comfort in a time of grief. But I think it can also just be a really dangerous trap for people who use it as, and I'm generalizing, but I think people could potentially use it as a a sort of crux as the way to grieve, like grieving through that sort of process. And I know people can get sort of hooked in a cycle of that, can't they? And it just goes on and on and on.
Absolutely.
And it's not just that either. It's also if you're prone to doing that, you might receive some small comfort from it, or even a big amount of comfort from it. But that's not the point. If you're prone to falling for that, you know, someone could phone pretending to be a Nigerian prince, and you're more prone to falling for that as well.
So yeah, Gilliver, I think you make a really, really, really good point with the if you're susceptible to one type of deception, you can be susceptible to other types of deception. I think the other thing with psychics trying to solve murders and stuff like that is that can potentially cause a lot of heartbreak and pain if they're always wrong, right? So they start pointing. Well, sure, a lot of money, but even if they just volunteered their time to like the police and said, "Hey, here's the murderer."
Even police's time, you know, police's time and money following.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So whatever, yeah.
Yeah, it's a waste of money. It's a waste of time and resources, but it's also like heartbreaking for the family to always feel this little bit of hope and then get let down, and then feel a little bit of hope and then get let down. I mean, the amount of trauma that it puts families through, I think, is enough to say that like that is so unscrupulous.
Definitely.
I think as well, the whole comfort thing is sort of a side to look at in terms of like, I know with religion that sometimes people make comments about comfort, you know, like, well, if you've got an elderly relative who's been a devout Christian all her life and she knows she's going to heaven when she dies, isn't it better to just leave her to be, you know, happy in a Christian faith, even though we might believe that it's a false comfort? And it is difficult, isn't it? Because we all want comfort, don't we? Like, we all want to feel a sense of comfort and like security in thinking about things. And it's not an invalid pursuit.
No, but and I would totally do that if I had an elderly relative who was in that position. Yeah. I'd have no like qualms about letting them believe what they wanted to believe if they were on the deathbed. But I think that's quite a different thing to having someone who's in the 40s or 50s who's lost maybe a son in an accident, just pulling something from thin air, and being, and I'm going to use the term because that's exactly what they're doing, preyed upon by someone who's telling them the son's in somewhere that will give them that comfort, but they're not on the deathbed. They've got a long time to go. Yeah. And where, like we said, where they are open to bad ideas. And that, to me, is the key thing, leaving yourself open to bad ideas. And that's what these people are preying on.
Yeah, I think when it comes to truth claims, like I'm a little softer than most skeptics in the terms of like, I don't really care what other people believe. Like, I myself want to believe as many true things as I can. And if something is wrong, I want to know, and I want to be able to analyze it. And I know that I hold many beliefs right now that are wrong. And as I identify them, like I'll decide what to do with those. But I think it is sort of a balancing act. Like Gilliver said, like if it's causing only good and no harm, and it's something that they need, I'm a little more hesitant to take that away from them. Yeah. But if it's something that there's a potential, like, for example, if they're donating money to someone like John Edwards, they're losing financially for zero gain whatsoever. Or if someone's leading them in the wrong direction to find a missing child, like when there's harm involved, there I kind of have a problem. So if someone wants to just go to a palm reading and they're like, well, I don't really know if I believe it or not, it's just fun, I don't have a problem with that. Just when they make a career decision based off of it, or they decide whether or not to stay with a spouse based off of it, or something like that to me, it becomes really damaging.
It's like going to a game of bingo. I know I'm going there to just pay some money and not win anything, but it's fun, and like that's okay. By the way, I'm not saying I'm an advocate for deconverting grandmas on the deathbeds. That's not my position. By the way, I'm just putting that out there.
No hate mail, please.
Yeah. And you do see, like I might see some people I know on Facebook saying, oh, me and a group of girls are going to a psychic show, who wants to come or whatever. And yeah, it's probably just like a good laugh and a good night out and stuff. But I think it is just those times when it does go too far in one direction, maybe.
Yeah. And having to balance out or identify when that is like, I don't know, for the most part for me, I'm pretty like, let's just educate people and let them make their own decisions. But like there is a point where I'm like, oh, if you want to go gamble and waste your money, that's your business. If you want to go do this and waste your money, that's your business. Like there is a point where it's like, give them the information and then let them do what they want with it. Yeah. But in terms of like my own approach to psychics, like I think that there can be a really fun, entertaining side as long as it's not being deceptive. Like the James Randi and the Darren Browns.
How do you not be deceptive though? Even I mean, I know people who claim to be psychic or have at least some psychic ability who they haven't got a deceptive bone in the body. They're not trying to go out and fool people, but it's part of the larger picture and the larger things that they're doing and the larger kind of hurt that they're potentially causing. How do you kind of, I mean, and with this person who I know in question, I will tell her outright, I think it's bullshit. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's not, I'm like you in general, I tend to leave people to believe what they want. I've got a lot of religious friends and I don't sit there. And if I go out for a meal with them, I don't sit there saying your ideas are bad, your thinking's bad, you've got poor epistemology because you believe in Muhammad or Jesus or whatever. I just don't do it. Yeah, you know, we talk about whatever we're talking about. But I think you have to take each individual circumstance as it is. Mm-hmm. And if somebody's, they may genuinely believe they're doing something, and in the long run, I mean, this particular person who I know is always kind of an emotional wreck because of, you know, when loved ones get ill or anything like that. It doesn't help her. It doesn't give her comfort. And she's going out and being part of these larger groups. She's actually runs a paranormal investigation team. And, you know, and they're just passing on and encouraging more and more of that behavior. So whereas she may not be going out purposefully deceiving people, she is still causing harm indirectly. And
yeah, that's a good... Oh, good. You can finish.
No, that I was finished. Go.
I think that becomes really, really complicated, right? Because from my perspective, I can't prove 100% that they're not psychic or there's not something more to it. So I can't say you shouldn't be doing what you're doing. But at the same time, I agree with you. They're going out and making more psychics and more paranormal investigators. And if it is 100% false, then yes, they are spreading and perpetuating falsehoods and potentially hurting people. If it comes down to like financial loss or emotional or whatever, there is harm that can be caused. So I get really confused in terms of like how I should approach that with people that I know who believe in that stuff. Like, do I discourage it or do I just passively say, well, I don't agree with it or I don't believe in it? You know, like how active a role do you take in that case?
Because it is hard to distinguish from the outside how much harm or otherwise that's doing someone, isn't it?
Yeah. Or and how widespread.
Yeah, and if you saw that something that was going on with one of your friends was harmful and you could really clearly see that, I think you are absolutely within your rights to try and combat that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's like that whole thing of like, your right to swing your arm stops at the end of my nose. Like, as long as, as long as what you're doing doesn't impact me negatively, go for it, fine. But we do care about people, don't we? And if harm's going on, that's not great.
Yeah, and like Gilliver said, like sometimes you don't know what harm you're causing because you're perpetuating something, and then down the line, it like may have an indirect effect.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought this was going to be less complicated than this when we started talking, because I think you know, like when we were talking about psychics originally, I was just thinking, yeah, I don't think any of that's real. There's not much to talk about it, but actually kind of it's opened up kind of a big moral question with all of this, hasn't it? Like it's a big morality question in terms of vulnerable people and helping people and levels of comfort and belief, disbelief, freedom to believe different things. And yeah, it's real complicated.
And sincerity.
Step in when...
Yeah.
Cool.
Oh, we both cut each other off and then we both went silent. Yeah, no, I think that there's also like what makes it even more complicated is what we were talking about with that level of sincerity. Like, how do you determine a charlatan from someone who really genuinely believes? And does it make a difference? If they're actually wrong and they're not helping people, does it matter that they're being genuine, or should they still be discouraged from doing that kind of stuff? It's complicated.
It is.
I think the whole thing, I don't know. It's the whole area for me is it's one where I have to watch myself, because it's one where I find it easy to ridicule people, and that's not what I want to do. I don't want to ridicule people, because it's I can understand how someone may believe in have a general belief in ghosts, or a general belief in religion, a particular religion, if they've been brought up and indoctrinated in it. But this is not something I find easy to accept why people believe it, because to me it's just so blatantly bullshit. You know what I mean? And it goes from kind of bullshit on one hand, that's the kind of best aspect of it, and then it goes to like just blatant fraud, and it's that makes it so difficult for me to not be kind of offensive about. And I don't want to, and you two guys know me, you know I don't go out to offend people on purpose, you know what I mean?
Of course you do. No.
No. Apart from
no, I think
that's not me, and I don't want to do that, but it just really kind of eats at me that there are people who are so bound up and caught up in this belief.
I think
people. Sorry, go on, Laura.
No, you first. Go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to say, like, I think it's really easy to think about that sort of a concept in different sort of subjects. So, like, as a Christian, I used to think, well, of course, Islam and Buddhism and Sikhism and stuff are all bullshit, because Christianity is the thing that makes sense, and I understand that. And like, I don't know why anyone would believe those things. You know, the limited thing I knew about those areas. It's interesting that you have that in like a different sort of frame. You know, like, because I guess if your parents sort of latently in the background believe in psychics and spiritual stuff like this, that might rub off on a child in the same, growing up in the same way as a latent background Christianity or Islam or Buddhism or whatever might do too. So I find it interesting that it's for you in like a separate category of bullshit. Yeah, I understand why you see it as that, and I do too. But I think for me, it's actually in a similar sort. Obviously, it's not organized in the same way as a religion is, but for me, it's in very much the same sort of category of people don't really understand this and sort of cling on to those ideas. Laura, what were you going to say?
No, I agree with what you're saying, in the sense that it does follow a lot of the same mental patterns. And so as the way that our brains work as humans, it actually makes perfect sense to me. But what I was going to say is, I honestly think that the whole psychic thing is way more subtle than you give it credit for, because we are the types of people that we talk about these kind of things all the time. We're talking about religion. We're talking about philosophy. We're in these discussion groups. We have these social groups. And to us, things seem really, really obvious. But to the average person, they're just going about their day, going to work, raising children, going to school, whatever it is. And they're only exposed to bits and pieces of information here and there. And it can be really, really compelling, especially when someone, say, guesses something right, or when they're watching it on TV and it's very carefully crafted and cut scenes to where it looks like, oh, every single guess is the right guess, even though they don't show the hundreds and hundreds of wrong guesses. Or they don't show that there's a person with an earpiece feeding them information. I think it can be really, really subtle. And I think that our brains are programmed to kind of feel that existential sort of, there's something beyond ourselves. So even those who don't believe in God are like, well, but there's something there, right? And
Let me try and clarify a little bit then what I was trying to say.
I wasn't criticizing.
We both just jumped on you.
I just thought it was
No,
interesting.
that is fine, and I want you to do that. It's just a broad clarification that to me, it's whereas most people would separate, for example, Scientology from Christianity.
Easily.
Most people would look at Scientology as blatantly a cult, and Christianity is a recognized tradition. And that's the kind of what I mean by the difference between them. To me, it falls more into the idea of Scientology rather than into the idea of if you want and this, I feel so wrong to say this, but a legitimate belief system.
Culturally
Like
defined,
Christianity.
legitimate system. Yeah. Everything being arbitrary. We've decided that Christianity and Islam and Hinduism and Judaism, that they're all acceptable cultural religions, but then these other ones, it's almost based on size. Like the smaller the religion is, the more, the easier it is to call it a cult.
Right? Maybe that is my prejudice coming through, and maybe it is based on sizing because it's not organized as much.
I mean, yeah, and it's because it takes a unique turn away from religion, right? Like when we're talking about psychics, we're talking about reaching out to the dead or intuitively knowing something about a person. It's kind of, in that respect, it's different from a religion. Religions teach about things like where we come from and where we're going and whether or not there's a deity or multiple deities. And so we're kind of used to what a religion looks like or feels like. And psychics fall outside of that. They're like their own little subcategory, of the supernatural. Don't go getting all quiet on me, boys.
Oh, Richard was going to say something.
I know what I said was not that profound.
I thought I was going to say something, and then nothing came out.
So you picked up on that psychically.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if I had anything. I did have something to say. Don't know what it was. We can cut all that.
I was hoping you were going to criticize me again, because I genuinely do. I know we said this quite a lot, but genuinely do love it when people disagree with me and give me food for thought and something to think about. Maybe I'm completely wrong, or maybe I just need to refine my argument. Maybe I've not expressed it very well.
Well, because I think as well, like with psychics, I think from the outside, from like our perspective, oftentimes as well, it can seem like this tacky sort of thing as well, can't it? Like the shows are tacky, and the stereotypical idea of going into a psychic shop, like I was talking before, is sort of this tacky thing. And I think because it's so much more obviously a money grabbing exercise, whereas like a church is a money grabbing exercise, but sort of discreetly at the back in a pot, or sort of through direct debits every month as you're tithing or whatever it is. Like it's just very upfront. This is so many pounds to have this reading. Aesthetically, I think it is very, very different to these religious ideas, and maybe that plays a part in it as well, potentially.
And going back to what Laura said with John Edwards at the start, where it does, it's more corporate. Even that is, it makes you feel a bit icky that somebody's like putting on this showmanship kind of just to try and extort money from you. In a way, and it does give you like this kind of cringy, horrible feeling. Whereas like, people in religion, even the people running the show, I have friends who are vicars and nuns and stuff, and they genuinely believe what they're doing. They're wrong, but they genuinely believe it. Whereas a lot of these people, these psychics, naming none because we don't want to get sued, but a lot of these psychics are genuinely going out just to rip people off. And it's that kind of horrible feeling you get when you've just got such a strong suspicion that someone's doing that.
Well, and I think that becomes an issue, like pretty much every time we talk about supernatural stuff, is the line is so fuzzy between people who just genuinely believe and genuinely want to get out there and educate other people about their beliefs and show other people why it's right, and live out their lives in like, oh, I really feel like I'm a psychic. I want to help people. I want to share my readings with people. And the people who know that there's an opportunity to make money here, right? That's true in just about every facet of culture and life and stuff. So you have it in religions, and you have it in these psychic circles. It's delineating between the two that make it so difficult to talk in terms of like morality and stuff. Because you're right, not every single one of them is a charlatan. But then you're also right, like it seems absurd that people would buy into it. But then, I don't know, for me, I have to realize that like everybody's line is different, and like our perspectives, even just the three of us, like our lines for what seems absurd. Oh, it's more acceptable to understand someone believing Christianity, because I believe it, but I can't really understand why someone would believe this. it is interesting how, if our perspectives can be that unique, I don't know, it seems pretty easy for me to believe that people would genuinely embrace this and say, yeah, I'm going to go get my psychic reading. And I think my psychic is really spot on.
Okay, so a question for you then.
Okay.
Based on what you've just said, and obviously open to you as well, Richard.
Thanks.
Do you think that people are more likely to fool themselves into believing this kind of thing? Or do you think, I think what I'm trying to say is, if someone's challenged, if you go to, for example, a Christian or a Muslim and challenge their beliefs,
Mm-hmm.
do you think they're more likely to question it from that challenge than someone who believes in kind of psychic abilities, and that they say, for example, John Edwards can genuinely tell them about the loved ones? Do you think if you challenge their belief, and there's a reason for asking this, and I'll tell you before you answer the question, if you challenge their beliefs, do you think they're more or less or the same in the respect of actually believing and being strong in that belief than, say, for example, a Christian or a Muslim would? And the reason I ask that is that I've challenged lots of religious people from lots of different traditions, and they tend to be quite strong in the belief system and not rattled so much by it. Some of them take offense, but they're not really rattled by it. Whereas, by and large, if you challenge someone who has a belief in this kind of psychic thing, they tend to get much more angry with you much quicker.
That's interesting. So
your opinion?
No, I was just saying, I don't really spend, this is going to sound like a crappy answer, but I don't really challenge people a lot with their beliefs. So I don't really know like what you're experiencing. Because just off the offset, while you were asking your question, I was like, I don't know. Like it would be up to each individual, right? Like there's individual Christians who are easier to challenge and then that are harder to challenge. And so I would assume there are more individuals who are or who believe in the psychic phenomena. There are some that are weak in their beliefs and some that are strong in their beliefs. But based on what you're saying with your experience, it kind of takes what I would have answered and kind of makes it invalid, because it just shows me that I don't have the experience or the data to even know what the different nuances are with these different demographics. Like,
let me clarify, by the way, that I am wildly generalizing with that question.
Oh, sure. And it's with your own experience. Yeah.
I'm just talking about in general. And
yeah, it's anecdotal.
Yeah.
My first intuition in answering that question would be that lots of religions have sort of inbuilt defense mechanisms. Like they're told, you know, like you will be challenged on your beliefs and here are some ways to combat that, or and what have you. Whereas I guess that's not necessarily part of the whole psychic experience. And possibly, and I'm just talking off the hoof, but like if someone's sort of invested in psychic readings and that, and maybe they've had a you know, a really strongly emotional personal experience about a loved one who's died or something like that, maybe that can be, well, understandably much more emotive experience and maybe a raw emotive experience that they feel they need to defend, as opposed to sort of a day-to-day defense of the religion that they've been taught to expect to have to do, perhaps. But yeah, I don't know. That's just sort of my first.
They're both very, very good answers, and both kind of shatter the question itself a little bit, which is good. Which is a good thing. Because it's not something. None of those things are things that I'd considered in why people respond the way they do. So it's good to kind of have that extra perspective there.
It's just amazing how complex cultural phenomena really are. So when you have a belief that a person holds, we can really take for granted all of the stuff behind the belief, right? Like every moment, every teaching, what brought them there, what sort of reinforcements they've had. Your question kind of actually exposes that a little bit, that like every person has a different, it's like they have this little belief and there's all this stuff behind it that reinforces it or formulates it or is responsible for it. And there's different.
Even you might have two people who have got a similar strength of belief and a similar conviction of belief in one thing or another, but may just respond to that question in different ways. Like some people might be full out like punch you in the face with their answers, whereas some people are just like, I'm not having that conversation. I'm happy where I am. I'm not having that conversation. You know, like, and it doesn't necessarily indicate a difference in belief or passion or conviction in that thing, but it's just, yeah, different ways that people approach it.
And it's that second answer that I don't want that conversation, which I've never, ever found when questioning psychics. It's always been the aggressive, or should I say the people who believe in it, not necessarily psychics themselves,
Yep.
but it's always that kind of aggressive, defensive thing.
But do you think that, do you think part of that is because people just get tired of being challenged all the time? And people who believe in psychics are already in the minority. Most of us don't. So they're constantly getting bombarded with like, oh, you believe in that garbage? Right. So I wonder how much of the anger, just like the angry atheist, like I wonder how much of the anger is really just people don't like to have their beliefs challenged. You know what I'm saying? And whereas like what Gil said, a religious person has those built-in defense mechanisms and they're ready for it. I wonder if a lot of the anger is just like you're hitting an annoyance.
Do you think they are
button.
challenged a lot?
People who believe in psychics? Yeah, I have a friend who believes in it, and she like one of the things she appreciates about me is knowing that I disagree with her and that I don't challenge her on it. Like that's something that she's like, I love that we can have different beliefs and still be friends and we can talk about things. And I can tell you about my beliefs and how I'm learning how to do these different things as a Wiccan, right? And you're not like constantly breathing down my throat about it, because she does. She gets it from everywhere. Like, oh, you believe that garbage? Oh, you believe that shit?
Do you think that might be a cultural thing? Again, going back to the kind of thing we talked about in the ghosts episode, because I think in Britain, so many people believe in ghosts and kind of psychic stuff and things that I don't see people challenging it very often.
Oh, it could be cultural. Yeah, I don't know. I think in America, at least, it's really considered like woo-woo, you know?
Yeah.
Like it really is taken a lot less seriously. I know that there are lots of people who believe, don't get me wrong, but I don't think it's necessarily mainstream.
Richard, your opinions?
Opinions. I think it's possibly like the ghosts thing, where I think it's possibly like, because we're sat here as like skeptics with skeptic hats on, and like we're considering stuff in a deep way. And I think it's one of those things that a lot of people, I think it's been mentioned before, but like don't necessarily delve into that deeply. And it's one of those, oh, maybe there's something to that, but it doesn't affect my life in a big way, so I'm not going to like think about it that much. And so they get an invite to a psychic show at the weekend. They go, that was fun and interesting. Maybe there's something in that. And I think, yeah, possibly I imagine it to be quite a common thing, just from my experience, that people having, like in the background is just like probably, I don't know.
Yeah. Like just, you can't take for granted, I think in any of our conversations, the different levels of education and exposure that people have to different ideas. I think that should probably be an occurring theme throughout all of our discussions, is that like when it comes to other people's beliefs, oh gosh, it's way too complicated, you know. But I know that go ahead.
I was just wondering, with you mentioning Wiccan in particular, that I've known a few people who, and I don't know whether it's because I kind of ride a motorcycle and I bump into these kind of people a lot when I'm out on my travels or what, but I've known and like meet quite a lot of people who profess to be kind of Wiccan and stuff, and even that is I don't see it being challenged. If somebody says they're a Wiccan, I don't kind of see a lot of ridicule going into it. But
because people don't really know that much about it generally as well. Like if someone says they're into psychics, people have more sort of knowledge about that generally, I guess, whereas I don't know that much about Wiccan as an idea, and so therefore I can't as accurately or sufficiently challenge it. Maybe that's part of that as well.
Maybe.
Yeah.
So what's that? Well, we're coming up toward the end-ish of the show. Like we still have a few more minutes, but I kind of wanted to get to a good point to start wrapping things up. So what I was thinking is if we could all just kind of briefly go over, I know that as skeptics, we're all going to say like, I don't believe in psychic phenomena, but if you could each kind of a little bit more in depth, then I'll get a little bit more in depth into mine. What are your feelings or beliefs toward psychic phenomena? Like not just the psychic individuals, whether or not they are sincere or insincere, but like psychic phenomena in general.
I think that I think it's difficult because to me, automatically, it feels like there's a poisoning of the well going on by calling it psychic phenomena. Because I think it's very easy for us to say, you know, there are subtle things that we do, especially if we know someone really well. But even if we meet someone for the first time, we're a social species. We can pick up on little kind of hints and body language, tone, facial expressions, and we can read people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of our being a social species. And I think the psychic phenomena the idea of it is an extension of that overall. Obviously, I don't think there's anything in it. And I think I've made my feelings pretty plain on that during this episode.
Yeah.
To sum up my general feelings, I think I can kind of understand why people can have some sort of belief in all those sorts of things generally, because I think there's loads about the human brain we don't know, but then like fields like psychology and stuff are all like, in terms of the history of humans, like new. Like
Yeah.
There's loads we don't know and loads still to find out. But I think until there's actual reason and evidence to believe in any of these things, then I don't. On a slightly separate note, psychic type Pokemon are my favorite type of Pokemon.
Heck yeah, they are. Psyduck.
Psyduck. Psyduck is like, to me, the god of all Pokemon.
You've lost me with this, you two younglings. I'm
ask your Pokemon friends, she'll know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would kind of mirror the two of you in my stance on it. I think I would take more of a soft. I'm definitely with you on Pokemon there. Yeah, although Mewtwo is my favorite, and I don't. Yeah, but anyway, so I would say that I'm a little bit gentler in my approach with psychics. I haven't seen anything compelling, and not just psychics, but like, can we talk to the dead? Is there dead to talk to in the first place? Right? Can we psychically link with someone and know their feelings and thoughts, or read their minds, or whatever? All the data that I've seen suggests that we can't. I just don't have any compelling reason to believe it. Having said that, if there is something else out there that we just don't understand, and that these people just haven't found the right way to demonstrate it to us, I'm completely open to the idea that there is something out there that we just don't understand. And
if there is something, I'd love to know about it.
And I'm completely willing to see the information on this. I'm completely captivated by the whole idea of like the psychic world and tarot card readings and palm readings and stuff. I'm captivated by how it works and how they learn how to do what they do. And if they do become convinced that they're actually doing something mystical or magical, I'm very, very intrigued to know why. Like, why, if you're learning how to do this and you become really good at it, where do you cross the line from, oh, this is just a fun trick that I've learned, that I've mastered, into, no, I'm really able to delve into the spiritual world, and there's something beyond me that is helping me with this. I find it far more fascinating in terms of letting go of my skepticism and learning more about it than, say, religions, where I've done all the studying and I've done the historical stuff, and I'm kind of a little jaded. Like, I think I'm still a bit more open to learning about the whole psychic thing than I am, say, with religion. And so if someone did come to me, I think I would approach it with more of an open mind, which may be unfair, but I'll just put it out there, being human. I'm completely, like, if you can convince me, then convince me. But I
don't think it's unfair to say that at all. I think, I mean, I'm coming from the opposite end of the scale, where I've been doing that for kind of years and years and years anyway. So I'm much more jaded. But I don't think there's anything wrong with going into anything with an open mind and being open to and receptive to listening to what people have to say. That's what we should be doing.
But I am more closed-minded when it comes to religions, and certain religions specifically. Like, I've already made that decision, and to change my mind on those would take a lot more, is what I'm saying. So I do feel like when it comes to certain supernatural claims and beliefs, specifically in terms of religion, I have already closed off a lot of, like, nope, been there, done that, done the research. You're going to have to really work hard to convince me. Whereas with more subtle phenomena, like, are there ghosts and can we speak to the dead and can we psychically link to each other? Like, I'm just, that's still interesting to me.
Yeah, I'd be really interested to hear from any of our viewers or listeners if they've had any of these sorts of experiences that they really do fully believe in.
Yeah.
Yeah. And where can they tell us about that, Richard?
What a pertinent and timely question.
Always right on time.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the Facebook, the official Facebook discussion group is going to be linked in our link. There's a link tree link with all the links to all our things, and it's on there along with all the other platforms on which you can access this show. So yeah, please do bob along there and have a discussion, because I haven't had very many experiences in that sort of realm of life, and I'd be very, very happy to hear some other people's experiences as well.
Yeah, let's get into some discussions.
Yeah.
All right. Do we have anything else before I close it up?
No, go ahead.
All right. I guess that's it for today. So in the meantime, we are Laura,
Richard,
and you've been watching Skeptic Hangout. Until next time,
keep questioning,
interrogate your beliefs,
and stay skeptical.
Bye.
Bye.